Welcome back to Puzzled Minds, where we discuss those 2 a.m. thoughts and try to solve the mysteries of the universe.
Thank you, Nicole, for coming on and joining us. Today's topic is brought to you by the letter N for Norms, part two, where we will be talking to Nicole, who is a single mother by choice, about decisions outside societal norms.
Hi,
Um,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
I kind of want to start this off by saying, thank you for taking the time out to do all this. And I guess my first question is, when we first connected, you had mentioned there were multiple ways of, I guess, becoming a single mother by choice. And so, would you be able to share exactly like how you became a single mother by choice?
Yeah, I can give you an abbreviated version of my
Okay.
story,
Yeah.
most definitely. So there are multiple ways to become a single mother by choice, and that's basically that you are deciding to become a mother or a parent, because some guys do this as well, on your own. So some women do IVF or IUI, and that is with donor sperm, or you can have a known donor. Other women choose to have a surrogate. Other women choose to adopt. Some women do multiple aspects, multiple ways, because they either can't conceive or they just change their mind in the middle of whatever they were doing. But me, I became a single mother by choice through adoption.
Mhm.
Okay.
But my story started with me trying to conceive before my daughter was actually born.
Okay.
And since we're talking about societal norms, I want to say up until maybe about the age of my mid 30s, 35, 36, I still had the thought process that I needed to be married to have kids. So I just want to put that out there. This is never my childhood dream or anything. My childhood dream was to be a mom and be a wife and maybe have 3 kids with my husband by the time I'm 30. Like, who doesn't think about that?
Yeah.
But it didn't happen that way. So at the age of, I believe I was 34, I had an unexpected diagnosis of endometriosis.
Mm.
Up until that point, my doctor, every year I go in, she's like, you need to get pregnant. I'm like, I'm not married. Every year, I'm not married.
Mhm.
And this is my doctor telling me this.
Mm.
And after my diagnosis of endometriosis, which was really sudden, if anyone knows about endometriosis, it's usually something that you've known for a while. You've had symptoms for a while. I didn't have symptoms for a while. I had symptoms for a couple months. They found out about it. I had emergent surgery the next month.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah.
So your case
So
was a bit unusual in the sense of like your symptoms just showed up one late and then kind of out of nowhere.
exactly. And I'm a nurse practitioner. At the time I was
Mm.
an RN, and I should know this. Like, I don't know what's going on with my body. And we finally figured it out. And so the same doctor who had been telling me for years, you need to, go ahead and try to get pregnant. I just said, okay. So after the surgery, after I healed from surgery, I went on and went to the fertility specialist, did the complete workup, did all my testing and everything. But
Mhm.
mind you, I did tell you I wanted to be married and have kids, but
Yeah.
I, this is so funny that when I say this and everything that I've gone through, is that I never actually wanted to be pregnant. And I think it probably took me a while to figure out that I never wanted to be pregnant, but I was in this situation where I had to have this major surgery. And, for years, my doctor had been telling me I need to try.
Mhm.
And so I went the societal norm and said, okay, well, yeah, I guess a woman should get pregnant,
Yeah.
right?
And
Um,
sorry to interrupt you. When you said your doctor kept telling you you need to try to get pregnant, was that saying was he saying it in the context of it'll be safer the sooner you do it, or was he saying no, you need to get pregnant based off like his, I guess, opinion or something of the sort?
she was telling me I needed to get pregnant based upon, my age. And
Okay.
at the time, I was in my mid 30s. And at a certain age, women, their ovarian reserve drops, and, meaning that they don't have a lot of eggs and the quality and everything. So that's what she was saying from her standpoint.
Okay.
That,
Yeah, I didn't know if she was just saying that like get
yeah,
pregnant because I say so. I'm like, damn, all
no,
right.
no, 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 no.
Aggressive
This
ass doctor.
No, this is coming from like motherly love. So I guess she was in place of my mother because, mom's asking for grandkids and everything else.
Of
And so
course.
I guess she was playing mom, you need to get pregnant. So
Mm.
um, I started the fertility treatments, and that was 2.5 years of hell. I'll just say that.
What do you mean by that?
So fertility treatments, due to my diagnosis of endometriosis, I went straight to IVF. So that was very invasive. So that's injecting yourself multiple times a day, recording your cycle, going to the doctor every couple of days. And so, mind you, I had a regular job. And so it's kind of hard for me to tell them like, hey, I need off, randomly. And it's very hard because you don't want people in your business. And then on top of that, everything is like regulated by these medications and regulated by your menstrual cycle and everything else, because you have to time everything just perfect. And so I went through, bought my sperm, got everything tested genetically on his side, got everything tested on my side. Looked like everything on paper was perfect. Like I got embryos.
Was it odd? Was it odd, I guess, to do things so it's almost like you're going to the grocery store and picking up the items you need for a recipe, right? And was it odd treating, I guess, having a child that way, or was it just, easier than we would think?
I think at the time, it was a little odd when I was picking out my donor. I mean, that is a little odd because you kind of look at it like, okay, what genetics will my future child possibly have?
Oh, that's an interesting take.
Kind of like designer babies, kind of.
Yeah, I hate to say that, but yeah, because
literally what it is.
On these profiles, okay, the age that they donated, what their occupation is, they give little, likes and dislikes. Some of them have pictures of when they were a baby and an adult.
Oh, wow.
Then you've got, do they have perfect vision or do they wear glasses? Then you have how tall they are, how much they weigh. So it's very detailed. And so going through all that, I'm like, well, this is really overwhelming.
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting. So how many potential donors did you have to, I guess, sift through?
Well, I can't say how many I sifted through because there's different banks. So how it works is there's major banks and you go through the bank and then each bank has, a different set of donors, like hundreds, thousands of donors. And okay. I mean, you're filtering this down by race, you're filtering this down by height, by how many previous pregnancies they've had. There's a lot of filters that you can filter through. And some agencies do have pictures, some agencies don't have pictures. Some agencies have a higher percentage of African-American donors versus other agencies that don't. I mean, it just depends on what agency you're going through. And some agencies, another thing to consider is if you get pregnant by this donor, how many potential other kids does this donor have?
Oh, I didn't even think about that idea that you're possibly born with like 17 other brothers and sisters, and I didn't realize it.
So some agencies have a high family limit, meaning that if I were to have a child, my baby could have 20, 30 brothers and sisters, depending on the agency, because the agencies tend to limit that. So when you get pregnant, you're supposed to let the agency know I've gotten pregnant and I've given birth, so they can kind of keep track of it.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. It's it's like the crazy thing about these rules is that when you hear them, it sounds almost uncomfortably very logical. Where it's like there's a limit on how many kids, one person can possibly donate. There's a limit on this, then that, you're searching through, essentially like a mate that has all the attributes that you'd want to, be essentially imprinted on a child.
Exactly.
So when you were going through this process, did you get any sort of, I guess, pushback from maybe people that I guess go through the traditional way? Not to say anything's right or wrong, but where anyone.
Oh gosh, yes. So some of the lines I heard, and this came from guys, I heard it from more than one guy, that, children should be conceived in love. Obviously, kids need a father. Maybe you just weren't meant to have children.
Wow. They really said that to your face?
Oh, yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Or you kind of get some of the remarks are maybe a little come from the side, not necessarily, straight up front. It's like,
Like a
okay,
side
so
jab.
yeah. So like, why do you want to have kids? Like, who asks a married couple that? Who typically asks a married couple when a married couple says, okay, yeah, we're trying? Who really flat out asks a married couple, why do you want to have kids?
Yeah, no one does.
Yeah. Or love my family to death. I heard, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I didn't think about that. I understand that. But did you tell my married brother that?
Yeah,
Wow.
it seems like people just can't comprehend. And it's honestly a very arrogant thing to say. Where a dude says, "Why would you want to have? It's gonna be hard. Why would you want kids?" It's because it's almost like those men are saying, "Without us, this is not something that should happen."
Yes.
Which sounds very egotistical, and that's the unfortunate part of some of these traditions.
And what got me is like the guys were saying you should conceive kids out of love. And I'm sitting here thinking in my head, you know how many kids are not conceived out of love? Conceived on a one night stand.
How many kids are conceived out of tequila?
Exactly.
Or COVID.
Or conceived from, okay, well, I'm with this guy, so let me just trick him, get off my birth control pills, and get accidentally pregnant on purpose, And
that teen love too.
Yeah. And so I'm like, that's not true. And I said, my child will be conceived out of love. Or the big one is like, you're playing God.
Oh.
And I'm like, well, I believe in God, and God gave us scientific knowledge to either, go by it or not. And he gave women and men who have fertility problems the capability of going through IVF. So if God didn't want me to conceive, obviously this isn't going to work for me. Obviously it's not. But I mean, it's not your place to say that this isn't God's, I'm playing God. Because
you're going to love the child. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying it's still ultimately in his hands, regardless of how I go about it.
And if you're going to love the child all the same, it doesn't really matter the means in which you, I guess, acquire the child. Not to sound, I guess, insensitive, but I think people put too much emphasis on the
creation part.
The creation of the child,
more so of the journey with your child.
Yeah.
Exactly. Raising a great person versus, what's the emphasis. I know there's such an emphasis of put on how things are created. Like obviously if something is, if a child is born as a result of a rape or something negative, I can understand why maybe that might be something that, people would take issue with. Even then, it's still none of their business. But to say that somebody's, choice to maybe a choice like you to go your route is immoral or has anything to do with God is just ignorance. It has nothing to do with God,
Yeah.
It's more or less your choice.
Most definitely. So when I went through all these treatments, so I'll tell you, I had the equivalent of 10 cycles, and that's injecting myself. So when you're injecting yourself for about a 2-week period before it leads up to the retrieval or the transfer. And so you're injecting yourself every day with these shots. You're going to the doctor, getting ultrasounds, getting tested, everything else. And so I had the equivalent of 10 because I ended up with about 7 embryos. One of my cycles was canceled. I had, another where I had a couple biopsies, but long story short, it was a lot of needles.
Sounds like it.
It's a lot of needles. And then on top of that, when I finally did get to my transfers, the first, let me see how many I did. I think I did 6. The first ones just didn't work. So they transfer 2 weeks later, I take a pregnancy test, not pregnant. And then, after a while, it starts to wear on you. It's not just financially. I mean, because, I was thinking about all this money I'm throwing out the window, but, psychologically and physically, because I'm bloated, because I'm making all these eggs and, my hormones are everywhere and I'm stressed out about my job because I keep asking for time off and now they're in my business and they know what I'm doing. So my last 2 transfers, I actually got pregnant. And the funny thing about that is I was excited. Of course, I was very happy because it finally happened. but I'd look in the mirror and I couldn't imagine myself with a belly. I couldn't imagine myself giving birth.
Wow.
I couldn't imagine this. And in my head at that point in time, I was like, this just isn't working for me because, you know, all the previous transfers didn't work and it still hasn't like really settled in that I'm pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my thought. But neither time I was pregnant did I imagine getting to the end point and having a baby in my arms from my pregnancy.
I guess like the whole process was so draining, you know, like you said, mentally, physically, and all that stuff, that when you finally got to the point where, you know, you're like, wow, I really am pregnant. Like, it's kind of like in that disbelief state. You're just like, you can't really believe it until it's there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I thought. I miscarried. And of course I was very upset, especially with the first one, because the first one I actually heard a heartbeat. The second pregnancy, the baby was too small to get the heartbeat yet. But I did go through with it, and I tried. And after I sat down and thought about it, it's like, you know, you've always wanted to be a mother, regardless. And, you know, obviously I wasn't married at the time. But way back in the day when I was a kid, I thought about adoption when I was a kid, because my father was adopted. And I was one of those kids that would be watching, instead of Saturday morning TV, I'd watch those commercials about the children in Africa that needed to be fed.
Oh yeah, those 2 a.m. commercials, right?
I'd sit there and I'd cry. And that's what I'd watch on Saturday mornings. You know?
Damn, very angsty child.
Yeah. And so my last miscarriage was like in September of 2017. And like I said, I'd always thought about adoption. And so I said, I'm just going to do it. And so I started my paperwork in January 2018. And I finished it and submitted everything at the end of April. And I had my paperwork done earlier, but I was like, I'm just going to wait, because with adoption for me, it was more of a short thing than getting pregnant. Because I put in my paperwork, do what I need to do, go to my classes, and eventually I will be blessed with a child. That was my thought process. And I didn't know what would happen if I, you know, put in my application and then like, here's a kid next week, you know, because you don't have that 9 months like you do when you're pregnant. You don't have that preparation.
And did you feel different about the adoption process? Was it draining? Because I know you're saying with the ups and downs of trying to get pregnant, I guess you could say the natural way, it seems that, you know, by the time, you know, you had the miscarriage, it's almost like you were over it, I guess, for lack of a better word.
No. Yeah. It was the easiest thing in the world. Okay. So people tell you how stressful, obviously adoption's stressful, getting pregnant, all that, you know, IVF is stressful, but people tell you that adopting is stressful. There's a ton of paperwork. It costs a lot of money. If you put in your application, you're going to be waiting for potentially years. Adoption was so easy. And then on top of that, you know, like, what can you tell me after I've been through all these rounds of IVF and all these transfers that didn't work for 2.5 years and shooting myself up and everything else I've gone through, and how much money I actually spent?
Exactly.
Because, you know, I'm a single household income here, right? And I'll tell you, I spent $50,000 at least just on IVF. And so when it came time to adopt and how much adoption was, that was nothing. Like, I'm used to spending $50,000, you know, that's nothing. Right. So like, how can I say, you know, adopting was difficult? And I hate to say it for all those people who, you know, have gone through adoption and how difficult it was for them, or maybe they're still waiting for their babies, but simple. So, and I'll tell you, I know exactly when it was, because I actually had a trip to Europe. I was actually heading out to Ireland. I put in my adoption application, my completed packet on Thursday. I flew out of the country on Saturday. On Monday, I'm sitting in my class in Ireland, and I get this message pop up on my iPad from the agency. And she's like, hey, I've got some news. Do you want to wait 2 weeks? And I'm like,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm like, no. And she's like, I've got a match for you.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And so when you, sorry to kind of like backtrack a little bit. So was the child already selected when they said like we have a match for you, or was it like during the process you were visiting children and things? Because I have very basic knowledge of adoption. I'm not too sure whether it's
No. I will help you. So there are different types of adoption. There's foster to adopt. So those are the children that are in foster care that may have been with their parents or their family early on. And sometimes you can get infants, but a lot of times the kids in foster care may be older. And there's also international, like if I wanted to go out the country. And there's also private domestic infant adoption. And so that's the route that I went. So that was domestic infant adoption, where I sign up with an agency, and the agency, when birth mothers come in to sign up with the agency, in this agency, the birth mother is going through profiles of hopeful adoptive parents. And obviously I'm a hopeful adoptive parent at that point in time. And so she saw my profile and she's like, hey, I like her. And so that's how the match was made. So the birth mother of my daughter had seen my profile through the adoption agency, and she wanted to meet me, and she thought I would be a good mother. So
wow. So that's actually really interesting, because if you think about it, in the beginning of this whole journey, you were kind of choosing, I guess, the particular donor that you wanted. And now, fast forward a little bit later, you're on the other end where they're looking at you and they're saying, oh, wow, I think you'd be a great fit.
Yeah.
It kind of came like full circle.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but yeah. And I'm eternally grateful for her. I'm eternally grateful. So I spent my 2 weeks in Europe. I had a blast there, but in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, when I get home, I've got to go to the adoption agency. I'm going to meet, my potential child's birth mother and blah, blah, blah. So I was in Europe, and I flew back home after 2 weeks, and we got to meet, and the baby was due. So this is early May when I finally met her. My daughter was born in August. So I didn't have a long wait at all.
So when you said your daughter was born in August, how was that emotionally for you?
Oh my goodness. So my daughter's birth mom, her only request of me was that she wanted me in the hospital with her. And I don't know if it's because she knew I was a nurse, or if it's just that she just wanted someone there in the hospital with her. And so I said, whatever happens, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm here in the Houston suburbs, and the adoption agency was in the Dallas suburbs. So we're about 5 hours away drive. And so I got word from the social worker that, the birth mom was potentially going to give birth pretty soon. And this is about a month before my daughter was born. And I flew up there, and, she, so funny. My daughter didn't come for a whole month, basically. So I lived in a hotel. I did not go back home. I came back home once. I lived in a hotel for a month, and I was driving myself crazy because I was in a hotel. But I lived in a hotel for a month because this is the only promise I can fulfill for her. And what she is doing for me is so much greater than how uncomfortable I am living in, wherever, can't remember, Holiday Inn, wherever I was staying. So I would be in contact with the social worker. I'd be in contact with the people at the adoption agency. I'd go to the doctor's visits with her. But long story short, it took about a month. And on my daughter's birthday, my daughter's birth mother wanted me in the room. She said, I just want you there, and you just basically, you have your baby.
Yeah.
So it's crazy because she was pushing it. She knew when she was about to come out. She called me up to the bed, like, come here. Basically, it was like, come get your baby.
Wow.
And so I was the first person to hold my daughter after the nurses. Went to the nursery with her. I stayed in the hospital with my daughter for 3 days. They were great, the hospital. I mean, they treated me just like I gave birth, but they gave me a room. I stayed there with my daughter. She was there an extra day because of a little bit of jaundice. But everything was perfect. It's so much different than what I'd gone through with the fertility treatments. And at a point, okay, this is what I was meant to do. I was not meant to go on the other path.
Yeah.
And I went on the other path because I was, trying to follow societal norms by, not by not being married, but the societal norm is, you carrying your own child. That's another thing you hear from people, like, why don't you have your own kids?
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah, you took a different route to the same destination.
exactly.
Put so much emphasis on the route you took.
Exactly. And I'm like, I don't get it a lot now, but like when I was, thinking about adoption and telling people or what, it's like, why don't you have your own? And I'm like, my daughter is my own, my child will be my own.
And in your opinion, why do you believe people put such an emphasis on it coming from your flesh and blood, even though, your daughter, like you're saying, you love your daughter, like there's no different, that is your daughter?
I think people are inherently selfish. And I think it's, I want somebody that looks like me. I want somebody that acts like me. And I'll admit, like after my last miscarriage, I told a couple people, like, I'm not going to have a kid that looks like me. I mean, it was just a general statement, but okay. But I think people are inherently selfish and they want a kid that looks and acts like them, but you don't know your genetics. Your genetics may not work like that.
And people who don't care about what they may imprint on that kid, it's all about, I want a mini me.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you hear about like, oh, adopted kids, you never know, what happened to them. Well, that's true. I don't know, when she was in the womb, when she was early in her pregnancy, what she was doing. But thing about it is, they're so traumatized, or they grow up to be druggies. They grow up to be this and that. I'm like, biological kids can grow up and be druggy. I mean, they can, they can all
happen to literally anyone.
Exactly. And so like you hear all the stigma about adopting, or maybe you're not going to love the kid as much as your own. And I can tell you that's a flat out lie, because I've had 2 kids that I've miscarried. And yes, I hurt. But I will tell you, no one can tell me that my daughter is not mine and that we were not meant to be mother and daughter. And what's so funny is, like, you haven't seen a picture, but what's so funny is, like, my daughter, no one can tell that she's not biologically related to me. So that's all the more confirmation I needed from God. Like, okay, she was a child meant for me. And had I not gone through all those fertility treatments at that exact time and everything else, I would have not met her.
Yeah. So I think before we started recording, we were talking about how, seeing, not failures, but, experiences that don't really work out for us as kind of like a learning opportunity. And, with this particular situation with yours, you kind of did that same thing where you kind of learned like, hey, like maybe this IVF isn't really for me. And so you kind of went another way, you went the adoption way, and it worked out for you. You have the daughter that that you felt like that was your daughter.
Oh yeah.
And so that's great. I'm glad that worked out for you, and your daughter as well. When so when you have your daughter, and it's, how is it, taking care of your daughter as a single mother by choice? Is it harder? Is it easier? Is it like, what's the experience with it?
You know what? I'm having a blast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more tired. I don't take naps anymore like I used to before I had her.
I think all parents like sign off that ability the second they have a child, right?
Exactly. But, I think about it and I kind of hear things from friends that are married or maybe are married and got divorced, and I think about it and I'm like, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that.
Mm.
And there's some things it's like, I don't have to, worry about if I were married or actually divorced. I don't have to worry about, sharing custody, sharing holidays. I'm selfish. I'll admit it, because I'm thinking if I had like a partner and we weren't together, I'm not sharing her. No,
Mm-hmm.
you can't have her for Christmas or summer or what. No. And then there's very, very rarely do I think that our lives would benefit from having, a partner, as far as, I don't know, maybe doing things around the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
kind of like
parenting,
shared responsibility and like doing the
yeah,
dishes and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah. And so, but you adapt. Like as a single mom, you need help. And so at a point, I stopped going to the grocery store and did Instacart.
Mm-hmm.
I got a housekeeper to help me every couple of weeks because my house was a mess. And I was working full time and I was tired. So you get help. But I mean, I guess from the outside looking in, it looks like it could be harder because everything is on me. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there are aspects where it's like, okay, well, this is easy. I don't have to ask anybody anything. We can do whatever we want.
No,
So,
exactly. Like,
Yeah, I guess you kind of like adapted, like you said before, like if you can't do things, you use what you can. Use your Instacart. Do you have like a strong support system as well? Some people that you can turn to, like, hey, I just need some, whether it be emotional support or anything like that. Is that like a foundation?
well, we have a big group, Single Moms by Choice. We actually have a fairly large following we have a forum and we have Facebook. They have local chapters. So I do get, we do have activities in our general area and we get the kids together, go places. As far as family, no family here because I'm about 8 hours from my family actually.
okay.
And my neighbor is wonderful. She's single. She's never had kids, but her and her partner dote on my daughter. So every holiday, my daughter gets stuff. They put out decorations in the yard specifically for my daughter to go over there and play with them. They have popsicles in the freezer on tap every time we're outside. So my
Wow.
neighbors are great. And it's just, I have support in that aspect, but I mean, it's so funny because like before she was born, as far as relationship wise with men, they'd do something, whatever, cheat, say something, I don't know. And
Mhm.
I would be like an emotional wreck. But now I'm like, I don't care, whatever. you know, there's been a lot of pressure that's been released since becoming a mother.
Mhm.
That's another thing too, because like when you're single and you want children and you're going by these societal norms, I need to date so I can find a husband or boyfriend at least and get pregnant.
Mm.
I don't have that. I have no inkling to have a child with anybody else. And that includes maybe adopting with somebody. I don't think I want to go down that route.
Yeah, so that was actually my next question. So, when people decide to be a single parent by choice, I guess in your particular case, a single mother by choice, is that like kind of like a lifelong commitment in terms of like you just don't want to have another partner with you, or like are you still open to the idea, or not still, but are you open to the idea of maybe you meet someone and not necessarily have a kid with them, but just transition from being a single mother by choice to a quote traditional family?
Yeah, traditional
So,
family by choice, I guess.
Yeah.
yeah. So there are some moms in the group who have successfully found men and got married.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some women in the group that have let their, I guess, their new mate adopt their child, or they've gone on and had children with that new person. But no, it's not a lifelong sentence. It just depends on, what that individual wants. So at this point, so if you would have asked me before she was born, obviously, yeah, I want to get married. I want a mate like that. I want lifelong commitment. But now that she's here, it's complicated. I want companionship, but the marriage aspect of it, it's not as sure as what it was a few years ago. For me.
Yeah, I guess I could see it being a very burdensome thing to add a new element of complexity, into the dynamic of you and your daughter.
Yeah. So I don't know what you'd call me. Maybe I'm a little headstrong, and I've been told that. But I guess bringing somebody else into the mix between my daughter and I, and them trying to tell me what to do.
Oh yeah. Like, hey, you need to, tell our daughter or tell your daughter that, you need to stop doing such and such. Yeah. It's very weird. It's kind of like,
Exactly.
overstepping your boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, most definitely. I had to cut somebody off when she was really young. They said something, and I'm like, yeah, no. That's not your place to tell me how to parent at all. But yeah, having somebody else potentially saying something about that. And then again, maybe having somebody else that comes into your life and you're with them, but they don't treat your child like their own. They treat her like a stepchild.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Some people may do that and not even know they're doing that.
Yeah. And yeah, I just, when you become a single mother or a single parent, you become very, very, very choosy who you let in your child's life. And my child is still young. She's 2. So, it's going to be a minute. I mean, I'll date and everything, but it's going to be a minute before I seriously consider, like, okay, I'm head over heels in love with you enough to marry you.
It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. You've been doing everything on your own. At this point, why let somebody in that could potentially, I guess, I don't want to say ruin that or jeopardize it.
Maybe unravel. Is that the word that we want to use? Kind of like,
yeah. I mean, because think about it. Like I said, she's completely mine. Everything is on me, good, bad. But if I were to get married, and by law, if that person is considered her father, and we get divorced, what does this mean? Does this mean he gets custody of her halftime?
Yeah, that's something.
Like, no. Yeah, so I have to think about that. Like, if I were to get married, like, would I let him adopt her? Because you have to, I mean, unfortunately, you don't want to think that your marriage is going to dissolve, but I mean, you have to think about that because she's involved. It's like, okay, I bring this person in her life and maybe they were great when we were all together, but now instead of just spending time with mommy, you've got to go off to this person that you met when you were however old, and you've got to share time with them. Or maybe if you were, happily married for a while and you got divorced, and then like all of a sudden, okay, well, I don't know who she is. I don't know who that kid and she is. Like, I'm just going to completely forget all about them. So like, it goes both ways. Like, if my child got attached to a man and he decided, well, I don't want to have anything to do with her and her mom, or now I've got, custody and I have to share custody of my daughter who I had on my own for X amount of years before we got married. I mean, there's just so many variables to that for me. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but.
No, yeah, no, I mean, that all makes sense. Like there's other things that you have to consider, especially with your daughter. There's another variable that you have to include into the whole equation because, this decision is kind of affecting both you and your daughter. And you can't really think of it in terms of just like a single entity type of choice, if that makes sense.
Most definitely. Yeah, we're a package deal.
Yeah, definitely. I guess to wrap this up, do you have any tips or anything for any other single mothers by choice?
Yeah, or women considering it. Most
Oh
definitely.
yeah.
If you're considering, I will tell you, just do it. You're not getting any younger. You can get married when you're 80, but you can't raise a child when you're 80. You can't get pregnant or adopt a child when you're 80. So, like I said, even 5 years ago, I would have said, I need to get married. Before I have kids, but no, just do it.
Just do it.
I mean,
gotcha.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there for you.
Cool. Yeah, I can, I guess, link some stuff in the description. If you want, you can send us some stuff that we can send in the description. If anyone's listening, they can check that out if that's something that they've kind of played with, the idea of maybe being a single mother by choice. Maybe, we'll link some resources that they can look into.
Oh yeah. Another big thing that comes up, I guess, is when, people have children and they're like, well, how do I explain my child's story to them? That's another thing that comes up. And so, there's things that you can do to explain it to your child when they're young and everything else. And so I actually, wrote my books when I was pregnant so I could do that for my baby that I miscarried. But, you've got to explain to your child, if you're going to go to the donor route or adoption, you've got to explain where they originated, where they came from, and not be ashamed of it, because they're going to feel that if you're ashamed of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like that whole that energy thing where people, if you feel someone being anxious or being negative, you kind of feed off that,
Yeah.
And so you kind of just want to project that kind of like positive, positive vibe of, just everything is good, be proud of where you came from and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you're still my child.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
And like I said, my daughter's still really young, but I talk to her and she'll understand it here in a little bit, but there's no shame. I have no shame whatsoever.
Definitely. Well, thank you for coming on and telling your story. It was really, really interesting. Like I said, thank you for coming on. Do you have anything that you want to plug in terms of like your, anything you want people to check out or anything?
Sure. So if you are in that realm, if you're a single mom by choice, you may be listening actually. If you're a single mom by choice, you need to tell your child that, how they came about. So I do have books on IVF, IUI, and now my new one came out for adoption. It's basically, this a book that you can read to your child when they're young and explain how everything came about, how you became their mommy. And I will say that when I had my miscarriage, I had written this book when I was going through my IVF treatments, my first book, and I miscarried by the time it was ready to publish. And I did not publish it under my real name. So all my children's books for alternative families are under Lee James, just simply because at that point, after the IVF failures, I didn't think it was my story. And so, but I wanted to have it available for other women. So this last book is still under Lee James, even though it's about adoption, just to keep, the trend. But it's something that you can read to your children about how they came about and how you became their mommy, and,
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I'll you just want to give me the link, then I'll put it in the description along with all the other resources that that we talked about before.
Yeah.
So
yes, that's
Cool.
great. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Well, if you like this podcast, this episode, smash that like button, follow button wherever you do find us. Follow us on our social media platforms. Instagram is Puzzled Minds Podcast, and our Twitter is Puzzled Minds Pod. Last but not least, thank you at Official Block of the Week for the weekly episode cover artwork. Other than that, everyone stay puzzled.